Some minds do not fall asleep by being told to stop. They need something quiet enough to follow. The baths are closed. The last bathers departed hours ago. The sound of their voices gone. The sound of water settling after use gone. The attendants who carried fresh linen and scraped oil from skin with the curved blade gone. The furnaces that ran beneath the floors were banked down before the closing. The worker whose work was to feed them through the bathing day, now sleeping elsewhere in the building. The outer doors are bolted. The colonnades that surround the changing rooms are empty. The building that was full of people from morning until the last hour of light is now full of the materials those people left their warmth in. The building is still warm, not everywhere. The outer walls, which face the night air directly, have been releasing their heat to the outside since the sun began to fall, and the stone of the outermost surfaces has cooled toward the temperature of the night air. But the interior, the room of the warm pool, the room of the hot pool, the corridors that run between them, is warmer than the night outside. Walking through the interior at this hour, a person would feel the difference immediately. The air of the exterior passage is the temperature of the night, and the air of the interior rooms is warmer, the difference fading toward the outer walls and concentrating toward the pools and the floors above the furnace passages. The warmth is not from the furnaces which are banked or out. It is from the stone. The stone is still releasing what the furnaces put into it. The scraping working together to produce a surface that is fine-grained, translucent at its thinnest, strong enough to be folded without tearing, smooth enough to receive the fine strokes of a quill. The process removed the hair and the outer layers of the skin. What remained was the deep dermal layer, the collagen fibers that form the structural matrix of skin, reoriented and compacted by the stretching and scraping into a dense, interlocked material. The production of a single sheet of vellum consumed most of a day. The stretching had to be calibrated. Too much tension, and the skin would tear when it dried and contracted. Too little, and the resulting surface would be uneven, prone to rippling. The scraping had to be done at the right stage of drying. Too early, and the blade would tear rather than smooth. Too late, and the material had already set in whatever irregularities the drying had produced. The person doing the scraping was reading the surface as they worked, adjusting the angle and pressure of the blade to what the material was doing at that moment. The grain of the animal is still present in the vellum. Where the hair follicles were, the surface is slightly different. Small depressions in the regular pattern of the skin, sometimes visible to the eye as a faint stippling in the surface, sometimes detectable by the way the ink sits in those areas differently from the rest. The scribe who worked this page knew where the surface would be reliable and where it might resist the ink or hold it differently. The vellum carries this knowledge in its surface without having been asked to. The floor of the warm room sits above a space. The construction required it. Beneath the tile surface, the bathers walked on. The floor is raised on small columns of fired brick, each column standing on the foundation and supporting the weight of the floor above it. with a gap between the columns through which the hot gases from the furnaces could circulate. The hot gases entered from the furnace mouth at one end of the building, moved through the space beneath the floor, gave up their heat to the stone and tile above, and exited through flues built into the walls. The system ran for the hours of the bathing day. The tiles above it absorbed what the gases delivered. The tiles are a few centimeters thick, fired clay, dense, with the high heat capacity of ceramic materials, the capacity to absorb thermal energy and hold it while the temperature of the surrounding air changes. Through the hours of the bathing day, as the hot gases circulated below and the feet of the bathers walked above, the tile took in heat from both directions, from the gases conducting through the floor and from the bodies in contact with its surface. By the time the furnaces were banked, the tile had accumulated the thermal energy of the day's operation. Beneath the tile, the brick columns of the hypocaust have also absorbed heat. The columns that hold up the floor, the small towers of fired brick set on the foundation at regular intervals, have been surrounded by the hot gases for hours. Their surfaces absorbed what the gases delivered, and the interior of each column has been slowly warming from the outside in, the thermal front moving through the brick at the rate brick conducts heat. By midnight, the interior of the columns is warmer than it was at midday. In the hours since the furnaces were banked, the tile above is beginning to cool, and the columns below are still at nearly their maximum temperature. The furnaces are banked or out. The tile is still at the temperature that hours of heating produced. It has been releasing that temperature since the furnace output stopped, conducting heat upward into the room's air, conducting heat downward into the brickwork of the columns and the foundation below. The release is slow because the material has high thermal mass. What was put in over hours will not be fully released over minutes. The floor is still warm underfoot. The water in the warm pool has not reached the temperature of the air. The pool is deep enough, a meter or more of water, the surface area much smaller than the volume, that the rate of heat loss from the surface is slow, relative to the total heat stored in the body of water. Water has a very high specific heat. It takes more energy to raise the temperature of a given mass of water by 1 degree than it takes to raise the temperature of the same mass of stone by 1 degree. This same property means that water releases its heat more slowly when the surrounding conditions call for it to cool. The water that was heated by the furnaces operating through the bathing day is holding that heat against the night in a way that stone cannot. The water is warmer than the air of the room, not dramatically so. The room is itself still above the outside temperature, insulated by the thermal mass of the walls, warmed by the floor's continued release. But the water is warmer than the air, and the air is warmer than the outside, and the outside is the temperature of a night in the season this city is currently in. These three conditions, water, interior air, outside air, are at different temperatures, and the distances between them are diminishing as the night proceeds. By dawn, if the furnaces are not lit, the water will have moved closer to the air temperature, and the air will have moved closer to the outside temperature. The night is doing this slowly. At the surface of the water, exchange continues. water molecules leave the surface and enter the air above the pool. The rate of evaporation depends on the water temperature and the moisture content of the air directly above the surface. The interior air is warm enough to have held moisture through the bathing day. The steam of the hot pool, the water from the bathers' bodies, the dripping from the walls and the ceiling. Now the air is cooling toward the wall's temperature, and some of what it holds in vapor form is being released onto the surfaces it contacts. The walls are wet. The upper surfaces of the interior walls, the plastered stone that runs from the height of a tall person to the ceiling, are receiving moisture from the air. Where the wall is cool enough that the air in contact with it cannot hold all the moisture it carries, that moisture is condensing onto the wall's surface. The condensation runs down the plaster in thin rivulets, following the small variations in the surface. A crack, a line where two sections of plaster meet, a place where the stone behind the plaster has a different thermal conductivity and is slightly cooler than its neighbors. The paths the water takes down the wall have been established by many nights of condensation before this one. The slight differences in the plaster's surface, the places where the mortar between the stone blocks creates a thermal bridge, the places where repairs have made the plaster slightly thicker, the places where the stone itself is denser and conducts heat differently, have produced consistent differences in the surface temperature. The condensation appears first where the wall is coldest and runs along the paths where the previous night's condensation softened the plaster's surface slightly, made the material more receptive, established the root. The wall tonight is running the roots that the wall has always run, because the conditions that establish those roots have not changed. The water that runs down the wall is the warmth of the pool, made visible at the cold surface. The pool is giving its heat to the air as evaporation. The air is giving the moisture to the wall as condensation. The wall is conducting the heat into the stone and out through the exterior, where the night receives it. The warmth that the furnaces put into the water this morning is on its way out of the building. It is at the wall now, crossing from the interior to the exterior, and the condensation is the sign of this crossing. Water marking the place where the warm interior and the cool wall meet. On the benches along the wall, the scrapers and oil flasks were left when the bathers departed. The scrapers are bronze, curved blades used to remove oil and sweat from the skin after exercise, a tool that the bathers used on themselves or had the bath attendants use on them at the end of the exercise period. The bronze was warm when the baths were active. The warmth of the hands that held it, the warmth of the room, the warmth of the skin it was pressed against. It absorbed what the room and the hands provided, and since the last bather set it down, it has been releasing this warmth to the air around it. Bronze has a lower specific heat than the stone of the walls and floor. It holds less thermal energy per unit mass, and it releases what it holds more quickly when the surrounding conditions are cooler than the material. A bronze scraper in this room at midnight has already equilibrated with the air. It has released what it held and is now at the temperature of the air around it. The floor beneath it is still warmer than the air. The scraper on the floor is at the air's temperature, not the floor's. The same room holds these two temperatures simultaneously. The floor releasing slowly over the course of the whole night, the tile and the brick of the hypocaust columns giving up the heat they have held against the cooling air. The bronze already at the room's air temperature, its contribution complete. The water in the pool somewhere between the two, cooler than when the furnaces were running, warmer than it will be by dawn. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. The bath was not warm because the fire remained. It was warm because the stone had not finished releasing it. The stone of the walls records more than tonight. Whether plaster has been damaged or worn away, the stone beneath shows the accumulation of years, a thin layer of mineral deposit on the surfaces that were regularly in contact with the warm mineral-rich water and steam. The water that filled these baths was not pure. It carried dissolved minerals from the source, calcium carbonate and magnesium compounds and iron compounds in small concentrations. When the water evaporated or splashed against the walls and ran down and evaporated at the surface, the minerals stayed. They crystallized from the water as it concentrated, nucleating on the stone surface at the places where the water was thinnest, building the thin layer that has now accumulated on the interior stone face. The deposit is thin, a fraction of a millimeter in most places, thicker where the water was most consistently present, where the splash from bathers reached regularly, where the steam condensed most often. The deposit is not a record that can be read as a sequence. There is no legible stratification by year, no layer that corresponds to a particular season. The years of accumulation have produced a single surface layer, the sum of the deposits unable to be distinguished one from another in the material that remains. The layer is the record of the accumulated use of this space, held in the mineral that the water left behind. It is also the accumulated record of every evaporation, every moment when the water was warmer than the air above it, every moment when the mineral-bearing water dried on the stone surface and left the mineral behind. The warmth that drove those evaporations is the warmth that the furnaces provided. The furnaces ran because people came to bathe. The people have not come since this afternoon. The minerals that their bathing left on the walls in years before are here tonight, on the stone that is slowly releasing the warmth that brought today's bathers here too. The furnaces have been running this building since before anyone alive remembers. The stoker who banked the fire tonight is not the first to do so. The hands that have maintained the fire in these furnaces through the seasons of many years, maintaining the heat that the bathers required, adjusting the fuel to the demand, banking the fire at closing, relighting it before dawn, have been different hands each generation. The specific knowledge of how this system ran, held in the minds and the muscle memory of people who are no longer alive. What one generation of stokers knew, they taught to the next. How much fuel each furnace required for different seasons. How to read the temperature of the floor above by the feel of the stone at the furnace mouth. How long before the bathing hours to light the fires so that the floor would be warm enough when the first bathers arrived. How long after the last bathers left before the fires could be banked. These judgments have been made in this building by different people for as long as the building has stood. The fires that heated the floor that the bathers walked on today were lit this morning by someone who learned from someone who learned from someone. The system they maintained is running tonight without them. The stone is releasing the heat they put into it. The water is cooling at the rate the pool's geometry and the stone's thermal mass determine. The condensation is following the paths that the wall's irregularities prescribe. None of this requires the stoker's knowledge. None of this requires the bather's presence. The building received what was given to it and is now returning it at the rate the materials allow. By dawn, the floor will be closer to the air temperature. The water will be cooler, still warmer than the air, because the water's thermal mass ensures it releases slowly but measurably closer to the temperature of the room than it was at midnight. The condensation on the walls will have run further down the plaster in the places where the wall remained cool enough through the night to keep receiving moisture, or will have stopped where the wall has warmed enough that the air in contact with it can hold what it holds. The building will be at a different state from its midnight state, closer to the outside temperature, most of the day's heat already released into the room's air. The room's air already exchanged through the night with the outside, through the gaps in the building structure. And then the stoker will arrive, and the furnaces will be lit, and the stone will begin to receive again. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. At midnight, the pool holds water that is still above the temperature of the air. The surface of the water is exchanging with the air at the rate the current temperature difference and the current moisture content of the air allow. Molecules leaving the water surface. Molecules from the air arriving at the water surface. The net direction of the exchange still running from the water into the air. The water still releasing to what surrounds it. The floor beneath the pool is still warmer than the water. The stone that surrounds the pool on all sides is still warmer than the air of the room. The tile still conducting outward at the rate stone conducts, still delivering into the room the last portion of what the furnaces delivered into the stone this morning. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. When night falls, the archive remains.